Iran seizing the Turkish oil tanker, the Advantage Suite, may turn out to be a massive blow to China's aspirations in becoming the world's strongest economy. As Peter Zeihan puts it, he attributes it to the reduced American commitment to the maritime order that allows global trade and energy markets to work, which in broader terms means that the United States doesn't really care that Iran did what it did. Moreover, he believes that this attitude spells more trouble for China than anyone else, since they're at the end of some major supply lines. But to understand where Zeihan is coming from and if it carries any weight, we should look into it. So make sure you stay tuned to Profit Protection as we try to piece together the factors that have led to Zeihan's conclusion, and you won't want to miss later on in the video where he mentions that China may very well have to deindustrialize as a result of American activity. That being said, let's take a look ourselves. For a very long time, countries have supported the concept of freedom of the seas and upheld the principle that all ships of all countries have the right to travel freely on the world's oceans without interference. Moreover, this law has been established and upheld by various international agreements and treaties, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. This is important because Zeihan addresses the fact that the US has historically defended its allies' right to transport via international waters, but of course, this wasn't because they were just really nice.
But its allies do. And the entire basis of the American post-World War II global environment was that we will fight wars to protect resource flows and product flows so that you will sublimate your military needs to us. Basically, we will fight your economic war so you don't have to, and that gives us a free hand and control of your militaries in case of a confrontation with the Soviet Union.
And much like how the Cold War has come and gone, the need for these policies has dwindled and become a diminished threat over time. That's not to say that the US has no interest in this alliance altogether, but rather it doesn't feel the need to overextend itself like it once did. All that taken into consideration, what could have prompted Iran to seize a Turkish oil tanker, and what was the American response? Iran claims that the tanker had collided with an Iranian boat in the Gulf of Oman and tried to flee, which maybe it did. I wasn't there. However, based on an article from Reuters, that's probably not the real reason why they did it, because both the US and Iran had a bit of a seize-off, pun kind of intended, where the US seized an Iranian tanker headed towards China because of sanction enforcement reasons, and so Iran doubled it and gave it to the Advantage Suite, which was headed towards Texas. But this isn't the first time that Iran has seized boats going through the region, as the larger cause of these incidents dates back to Donald Trump pulling the US out of a nuclear power deal in 2018 and subsequently imposing harsh sanctions against Iran. Turns out they don't really like sanctions, and since then there have been instances of Iran seizing Greek, South Korean, and British tankers, to name a few. Zeihan mentions though that the US's response to the incident is pretty underwhelming, and here's why.
Basically, we will fight your economic war so you don't have to, and that gives us a free hand and control of your militaries in case of a confrontation with the Soviet Union. The Russians may be coming back in a big way, but they are not the Soviets and they do not have a global position. And so the United States, bit by bit, under Obama, under Biden, under Trump, have all basically steadily reduced the American commitment to the maritime order that allows global trade and global energy markets to work. And so this Advantage Suite, this tanker that's been gone, the US really doesn't care. But if you're China, this is a problem because the entire existence of the Chinese economy and its strategic position is based on the idea that the United States, no matter what else happens, no matter what the Chinese do, no matter how much military action China carries out, that the Americans will still uphold civilian freedom of the seas. And as we've seen today, again, the US has no interest in that anymore.
The Americans also haven't hesitated to do the same thing, as last year they had seized an Iranian boat near Greece, which is why Iran didn't mind seizing Greek tankers going through the Gulf. Okay, so you get the seizing part, but ultimately, what does this have to do with China? Well, at face value, not so much, besides the fact that the Advantage Suite is owned by a Chinese company. However, it does show that maritime travel is vulnerable to disruptions, and while the US can just trade with its North American neighbors, China doesn't necessarily have such a good relationship in its own neighborhood, so it relies on maritime trading pretty heavily, which brings us to this vital point.
Next time we do get a meaningful interruption to international energy flows, The United States basically closes its borders to energy trade, it's self-sufficient within North America, and the Chinese are at the very end of a very long supply line that they have no hope of protecting, and that means they'll deindustrialize, and that means it's the end of China's unified nation state.
I know, that's a pretty bold claim, but it's not the first time Zeihan has mentioned China's demise. In fact, if you want to learn more about that, you can check out our other video where Peter Zeihan explains why China is close to economic and social collapse. Furthermore, Zeihan also discusses how the war in Ukraine has itself caused disruptions in the global supply line, to the extent that it serves as a lesson to China that any more of these incidents can leave them in a bad position, especially because they are the #1 seed trading country. In fact, when it comes to trade with Ukraine, China's trade with them amounted to $7 billion in 2022, a decline of 60.3% compared to the previous year. Chinese imports from Ukraine fell by 56%, while exports dropped by 64.9%, therefore proving that China is stumbling. Additionally, an article by ChinaPower.org describes how China's dependence on the South China Sea makes it susceptible to disruptions in maritime trade. Back in 2003, Hu Jintao, the former president of China, brought up the possibility of certain major powers, wink wink wink, seeking to control the Strait of Malacca, which highlighted the importance for China to develop new approaches to tackle this issue. Following this, the Chinese media placed great emphasis on the potential risk highlighted by Hu Jintao, and Chinese academics emphasized the necessity of finding alternative shipping routes to resolve this Malacca dilemma. Meanwhile, Zeihan also addresses the fact that the US has made policy changes to reduce their commitment to the overall defense of various shipping lanes, and provides that at any time they can just continue shipping with their regional neighbors, as already mentioned.
The United States, bit by bit, under Obama, under Biden, under Trump, have all basically steadily reduced the American commitment to the maritime order that allows global trade and global energy markets to work.
So while it may seem intimidating that China is building ties with America's rivals, they still have to be careful to not overstep their bounds, as the reason for China being able to trade at their current rate is due to decades of Americans piecing things together in their own favor. So consider it somewhat of a parasitic relationship. This is something that plays into an article written by Defense 360 that broadly discusses the notion of militarization as a way to patrol international waters, specifically on the part of the US, as being something that's only going to stoke the fire. But like Zeihan said, the US isn't in the business of using globalization to expand their influence, since neither China nor the Americans wish to disrupt the way things are. Therefore, the way things stand, China is at the mercy of the alliances that America has made, but it would also hope to continue using America's presence in vital regions as a deterrent against volatility. Zeihan himself believes the necessary steps have been taken by the US to uphold their own interests, which provides a level of stability for most. The seizing of Iran's oil tanker in the Gulf is just one example of who calls the shots and reinforcing their own interests where they see fit. In any case, we'll be monitoring the seas to see whether any more boats will be seized. In the meantime, make sure you like the video to show your support and subscribe to Profit Protection to stay up to date on any new content. And once again, make sure to check out our video in which Peter Zeihan explains why he thinks China will collapse within the next 10 years. But as for now, that's all from us here at Profit Protection, and until our next video, I'll be seeing you.